This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as investment, tax, or legal advice. Any examples or frameworks discussed are general in nature and may not be suitable for all investors. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. Past experiences and planning approaches do not guarantee future results. What happens if your kids don't want to manage the real estate portfolio you've so carefully built? You may be looking over your personal balance sheet, thinking about the effort and the commitment and the time that it took to build it, and it might be filled with a gleaming portfolio of properties that you're proud to own. But what if none of your children want to own it? What if they don't have the right experience to manage it well? What if they simply don't have the time? Then what? It's easy for a parent to assume that one of their kids will step up, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen. And if they already have a different career, what's really going to compel them to turn their attention away from that, especially if they're true experts in their field? Much of your multi-gen planning really hinges on your family's operating model. So who makes decisions, who's accountable, who benefits financially? And I see three archetypes that a family can really neatly fit into when it comes to real estate. So first, there's the owner-operator family. So this family just has a natural path to the next generation. Everyone agrees that a next-gen family member is going to take the reins, and they all have the interest and the capability and alignment to get it done. The second one is the owner-allocator family. So this family owns assets but hires out professionals, and these third-party professionals still require oversight. And then the third is the exit and reallocate family. So this family sees real estate not as a required part of the family's wealth, but recognizes the value that it's already brought. So here's a really important question for high net worth families. What happens when the next generation wants a much different portfolio than the previous generation? And that's what I want to talk to you about today, how to talk about it, what options are available to you, and then what I'm doing in my own family to navigate this tough decision. So let's be real, owning directly managed real estate can be a pain in the butt, even with the benefits. And even though it's categorized as a separate asset class from other directly held businesses, it's still operated like one for families who rely on real estate heavily for wealth creation. And with this potential for being a pain in the butt, it's no wonder that not every son or daughter is going to want to jump into a management role. And if they've already charted a path somewhere else, then managing real estate is going to seriously detract from that other expertise that they've already cultivated. So if you're facing this situation, the first thing might be that you're thinking about, how do you even bring this up? So the first question I would like to know is, what have you already talked about? Does the next generation even know what the family's real estate holdings are? And if they are aware, then how interested are they in committing to management? And depending on the size of your real estate portfolio, it could span all the way from just a side hustle to a full-time job plus overtime. So I think that structuring these questions into family meetings is a great way to initiate or even continue the conversation. And you can even formalize this, if you want, into investment policy statement for the family. And then there's a lot of factors at play. So you're going to want to figure out how much weight you want to assign to all the important elements of the process. So these things include like cash flow needs, simplicity, long-term equity compounding, and family harmony. And if the next gen has the experience, the capacity, and the interest in real estate, then you can rely on succession to the next generation. But if they lack even one of those three elements, then I think you have to approach your transition plan differently. So there's a few options that I see that are pretty straightforward. One is just to professionalize the management. So you can do this at the property level, or you can have a manager for all the assets in the portfolio. Another thing you can do is just sell the assets. You can do this outright or trade into different real estate with more agreeable management characteristics. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing decision. You can have partial liquidity, phased exits, tax-deferred exchanges, UPREITs, DSTs. Those are all on the table too. Another strategy is to bring in partners. So take some chips off the table, build in some resiliency with decision-making and management, but also leave some upside available. Another strategy that could work really well is a family buyout. And this works well if you have one or more children who aren't interested in participation, but then there's other children who are interested. So the ownership concentrates with the children that are interested in real estate while giving liquidity to the children who aren't. And then, of course, there's the age-old strategy of do nothing. And this works if you aren't willing to accept inefficiency temporarily but you can still have an exit ramp using a step-up basis. And I'll touch on that a little more later. So what I'll jump into now is how we're thinking about it in our family. So my parents have 3 properties. They're all in the automotive space. So the first one is an absolute net lease building in Texas. They just rent to a single tenant with a national presence, and the property is extremely light on management. Like the rent's just electronically transferred monthly. Tenant manages the property, and my folks just have to verify that the real estate taxes and insurance are paid and that their holding entity is in compliance. And my sister and I have no problem taking this on. So second, they have a small auto repair center in West LA County, who they own with another investor. And the other investor is actually the on-site manager, and he operates his business there as a repair shop. So as long as he's involved, then we don't really have to worry about management. And if he chooses to retire, he still retains a high motivation because he owns 50% of the building. So he wants to make sure the property performs at a high level, just like we do. So not as easy as that Texas property, but still manageable because there's another investor who has skin in the game. And then third, they own a larger auto repair center, but this one's in East LA County. And this one they own all on their own. So this property has a greater number of tenants, has had more turnover historically, and just overall is much more management intensive. So my dad operates the strategic initiatives for the building, which include like prospecting for tenants. And then my mom does all the admin tasks. And then they also have an on-site manager who is a former tenant of the building who takes care of the smaller day-to-day tasks. So what's interesting about this property is that the manager doesn't have any skin in the game other than the monthly management fee. So realistically, the property could lose on-site management at any time. And on-site management there would be a pain for any of us because I live far away. My mom doesn't have the necessary skill set, and my dad's just getting old. And then all 3 properties are held inside LLCs, which are held in a living trust. And they're also long held properties. So there's very little basis, and a large looming tax consequence is there if we sell. So now you've got all of the setup for the situation. So here's how we look at the long-term strategy and how we envision things going. So we'll hold the net lease property in Texas for the foreseeable future. Like I said, easy to manage. And then we'll hold the West LA property until the other investor is no longer interested in managing. And then we have 2 broad strategic exits we can take. We can either go to an income investor or we can go to a developer. And then from there, we could do a 1031 exchange into a light or no management property and defer the income tax bill. And then our plan for the East LA property is to hold until the manager quits. Despite the added cost and not having an obvious candidate currently, we would hire a different on-site manager to carry us to the next fork in the road. And then again, we have the same strategic exit options as the West LA property, and we can utilize Section 1031 to our advantage. So we really like the strategic plan because it works well with offloading the management burden. We retain real estate exposure and we preserve our tax deferral goals. But we know something's coming down the pike here, and that's going to be a critical moment where everything changes and it's simply unavoidable. And that's going to be the death of my father. So my father's 90 years old, so he's coming to the end of his life, and realistically that could happen at any time. My mother is a lot younger, no health problems. So in all likelihood, my dad's going to pass away first. And what's unique about California, which is a community property state, the residents can receive a step-up basis on their assets when the first person in a married couple dies, as long as they've titled their assets properly. Totally an estate planning question. This is not legal advice. This is something that you definitely want to talk about with your counsel. Anyway, in our situation, this is going to allow for a tax reset on the basis of these real estate assets. And that's going to give us this really unique opportunity to rebalance the portfolio without having to do any 1031 exchange and mitigating the tax burden significantly at that time. So at this stage, we can simply sell the properties, relinquish all the management burden, and we can take our time finding suitable replacements without having to worry about the large built-in tax that's currently looming. And then right now, we could make some changes. We could rebalance, but using a 1031 exchange, while it's a great tax deferral strategy, you've also got to deal with the strict timing limits on identifying and completing the transactions, and you can't exchange into non-real assets. So you are limited to some degree on your rebalance. And we've had situations in the past where we've done 1031 exchanges, and it's led to some suboptimal decision making because we were rushed. So while we're not looking forward to this moment, it is going to give us some more optionality on what we can do with our investments. Now, ultimately, this isn't really a question about what to do with real estate. It's more about what the wealth is supposed to do for your family. So I recommend at least starting a conversation with your family, even if it's uncomfortable. Map out your current assets and assess everyone's future willingness to manage them, and then identify trigger moments that would require action to be taken. So death or retirement are two obvious ones. And these kinds of decisions are really important. They don't show up on the balance sheet. And even though this type of wealth management requires a lot of technical know-how, the underlying consequences are really what drive the decisions.